I want to begin, my dear, at a Christmas dinner table, surrounded by my family, the moment before I broke a silence I had kept for 30 years. I was 80 years old. The whole family was there, children, grandchildren, the lot, and at the far end of the table sat my sister Vera, 78 now. And between Vera and me lay a lie so old that most of the people in that room had grown up believing it was simply the truth. The truth that I, Edith, was the one who had behaved shamefully all those years ago, who had broken Vera's marriage, who was the family's quiet disgrace. For 30 years I had let them believe it. For 30 years I had sat at the edge of every gathering, feeling the whispers, wearing a guilt that was never mine. And on that Christmas night, my dear, for reasons I'll come to, I set down my fork, and I felt my heart hammering like a girl's, and I said, "There's something I should have told all of you 30 years ago." And the table went quiet, but to understand why I finally spoke, and why I'd stayed silent so terribly long, you must let me take you back to 2 sisters and a rainy night, and a promise that cost me half my life. My name is Edith, and I am 81 years old now, and I live in a small house in a town in the Welsh borders where I was born, and where for most of my life I was known, quietly, never to my face, but I always knew, as the one who'd done that terrible thing. I had a sister, my dear, younger than me by 3 years, Vera, and growing up Vera and I were as close as 2 sisters can be. I was the steady one, the sensible one, the one who looked after things. Vera was the pretty one, the lively one, the one who felt everything too much and leapt before she looked. I adored her, my dear. I was more than a sister to her. After our mother died young, I was half a mother to her too, and I'd have done anything to protect her. Remember that. My dear, I'd have done anything. It's the hinge the whole story turns on. I'll tell you one thing from our girlhood, my dear, so you understand the bond. When our mother was dying, I was 19, Vera 16. It was me she called to her bedside, and she said, "Edith, look after your sister. She feels things too hard, that one, she'll get herself into scrapes, and she hasn't got your sense. Promise me you'll always look after her." And I promised. At 19, by my mother's deathbed, I promised to look after Vera always. Do you see, my dear, how the threads of a whole life can be spun from a single sentence spoken by a dying woman to a frightened girl? Every choice I made 30 years later, in the rain outside that man's house, I made because of that promise to my mother. I was not just protecting my sister. I was keeping faith with my mother. That is how these things bind us, not with chains, but with love, which holds far tighter than any chain ever could, and is far harder to lay down. Vera married young, a good steady man called Gwyn, a kind, quiet, hard-working man who worshipped her, and who gave her 3 children and a comfortable home. And for some years all was well. But Vera, my dear, was the sort who feels the walls closing in, who gets restless, who wants more than the quiet good life she's been given without ever quite knowing what the more is. And about 32 years ago, when she was in her mid-40s and her children were teenagers, Vera did a foolish, dangerous thing. She began to see another man. I knew about it before anyone because Vera told me, sobbing, frightened, ashamed, the way she'd always brought her troubles to her big sister. And I did what I'd always done. I tried to help her find her way back. I told her she had to end it, that she was risking everything that mattered, Gwyn and the children and the whole of her life, for a fever that would pass. And she knew I was right, my dear. In her heart she knew, and she resolved to end it. She had got herself into a tangle the way people do. And there were letters, foolish letters, that the other man still had, and a final meeting she felt she had to go to draw a line under it all and retrieve what she'd written before it could fall into the wrong hands. And Vera, my dear, was too frightened to go. She was certain that if she was seen at that man's house, even to end it, Gwyn would find out and everything would come crashing down. So she asked me to go for her, to go to the man's house late on a wet night and collect the letters and deliver Vera's message that it was finished, so that Vera herself need never be seen there. And I, my dear, I went. Of course I went. I'd have done anything to protect her, and to protect Gwyn and those children from a truth that would shatter them. I put on my coat and I went out into the rain to that man's house to clean up my sister's mistake. I remember that night so clearly, my dear, every detail of it, the way you remember the nights that change everything. The rain coming down steady and cold. The man's house, a smart little place on a street I'd no business being on. My knock and the door opening, and the surprise on his face that it was the sister and not Vera. He was not a wicked man. I'll say that, only a foolish one who'd let himself believe a restless married woman's fever was love. I told him plainly that it was finished, that Vera would not be coming, that he was to give me the letters and trouble her no more. And to his credit he did. He fetched them without a fuss, a little bundle tied with string, and he stood in his doorway and he said, "Tell her I'm sorry." And I put the letters in my bag and I turned to go back out into the rain. And that, my dear, that single ordinary movement, a woman putting a packet into her bag and stepping out of a bachelor's door at night, was the picture that the gossiping neighbor across the road framed in her window and carried out into the world. She did not see a sister cleaning up a mess. She saw what she wanted to see, what made the better story. People mostly do. And I was seen, my dear. That is the whole tragedy of it in 5 words. I was seen. Neighbor of the man's, a dreadful gossiping woman, saw me, Edith, the sensible married sister, leaving a known bachelor's house late at night in the rain with my coat collar up, putting something into my bag. And by the next week the story was all round the family and half the town. Not the true story. The story that fit what the woman thought she'd seen. That Edith, steady, sensible, married Edith, was carrying on with a man who wasn't her husband. The very thing my sister had done. But the town now believed of me, and here, my dear, is where the promise comes in, the promise that shaped the next 30 years. Because I could have cleared it up in a single sentence. I could have said, it wasn't what it looked like, I was there for Vera, it was Vera's affair, not mine. The truth would have exonerated me completely. But the truth, my dear, would have done exactly what going in my place had been meant to prevent. It would have exposed Vera, destroyed her marriage to Gwyn, and shattered those 3 teenage children who adored their mother. My truth and my sister's ruin were the same sentence. I could not say the one without causing the other. And so, when Vera came to me white with terror and begged me to say nothing, to let the false story stand, to protect her and her children, I made her a promise. I said, I'll say nothing, Vera, not ever, your children will never know, I'll carry it, and I meant it. And God help me, I kept it. For 30 years. Now I must tell you what that promise cost, my dear, because the cost is the heart of this story. And it is a cost I do not think I properly counted at the time. My own husband, a good man, believed the gossip at first, and though we weathered it and stayed together, something between us was never quite the same again. A small permanent crack of doubt I could never explain away without breaking my promise. He never accused me again. After the first dreadful row, he was too decent for that, but I would catch him sometimes over the years, looking at me with a question in his eyes that he never asked, and I could never answer. On our wedding anniversary, on quiet Sunday evenings, in the middle of perfectly ordinary happiness, that small shadow would pass across his face, and I knew what it was, and I could not lift it, because to lift it I would have had to hand him my sister's ruin. He went to his grave, my dear, my good husband, never entirely sure of me, and that is a grief I carried alone, and could tell no one, for the grief itself was made of the very secret I was keeping. Do you see how a single silence spreads, my dear? It does not stay in one place. It seeps into a marriage, into a deathbed, into every corner of a life, staining things you never thought it could reach. My reputation in the family was ruined. I went overnight from the sensible, reliable eldest, the one everyone came to the cautionary tale, the one whose name was said with a particular tightening of the lips. There was my niece's wedding, my dear, Vera's own daughter, perhaps 10 years after the rainy night. A beautiful day, the whole family gathered, and I was placed at a small table near the back by the door to the kitchens, with the people nobody quite knew where else to put. And during the speeches, the father of the groom made a little joke, a careless thing about keeping an eye on which aunties you trust, and his eyes flicked to me just for a second, and a ripple of knowing laughter went round the room, and I sat there in my good blue frock and smiled as though I hadn't understood, my dear, while inside me something quietly broke. And the worst of it, the very worst, was that Vera was there, the bride's mother, radiant in the place of honor, and she heard that joke too, and she did not say a word. She let it land on me and slide off her, the way it had for 10 years, the way it would for 20 more. I drove home from that wedding alone, my dear, and I cried the whole way, not for the joke, but for the knowledge, settling deeper every year, that my sister would let me be the family's fool forever rather than spend 1 ounce of her own comfort. At family weddings, I was seated at the edges. At funerals, I felt the whispers follow me up the aisle. Cousins kept their daughters a little away from me, as though whatever I'd done might be catching. For 30 years, my dear, I was the family's black sheep, and the cruelest part, the part that ate at me in the small hours, was that the actual black sheep, my sister Vera, sat in the middle of every gathering, respectable and beloved, her marriage intact, her children adoring, while I bore the disgrace that was rightfully hers. And she let me. That is the thing I struggled with most, my dear, and struggle with still. Vera never owned up. As the years passed and it grew safe to, as the children grew up, as Gwyn passed away, as the danger faded, still she never spoke. She let the comfortable lie stand, because her whole respectable life was now built on it, and to tell the truth would have cost her something, and she had grown used to my paying that cost instead. And I told myself, my dear, for 30 years, that my silence was a noble thing, that I was being the bigger person, that rising above it, bearing it with dignity, never stooping to defend myself, that this was virtue. We are taught that, aren't we, to turn the other cheek, to not make a fuss, to suffer in silence and let our good conscience be its own reward. And there is truth in that teaching, my dear, real truth. But I have learned very late that there is also a lie hidden inside it, and the lie is this, that silence is always the higher road. Sometimes, my dear, silence is not nobility at all. Sometimes it is just fear wearing nobility's coat. And sometimes by staying silent to protect someone from a small consequence, you allow a far greater wrong to roll on, year after year, crushing the innocent, and the innocent it crushes most of all in the end is very often yourself. What finally changed me, my dear, after 30 years was my granddaughter, my Lowry. Lowry is 24, and she is the most like me of any of them, steady, sensible, kind, the one who looks after everyone. And last autumn I watched something happen to her that froze my blood, because it was my own story beginning again. There was a falling out in the family, the details don't matter, a business between Lowry's aunt and uncle, money and blame, and Lowry, to protect someone she loved, to keep the peace, took on herself a blame that was not hers. She let the family believe she'd done something she hadn't, because telling the truth would have exposed someone she wanted to shield. And I watched the family begin to turn on her, just slightly, the first whispers starting, and I watched my granddaughter set her jaw and prepare to bear it in dignified silence, exactly as I had 30 years before. And I thought, my dear, with a horror I can hardly describe, she's going to do what I did. She's going to give 30 years of her life to a lie to spare someone a single bad afternoon. And she's going to call it virtue, and no one will ever stop her, because the one person who knows where that road leads has spent 30 years too frightened and too proud and too bound by an old promise to say a single word. I lay awake the whole of that night, my dear, wrestling with it the way Jacob wrestled the angel. On the one side was my promise, 30 years old, made to a terrified sister, sealed by a deathbed vow to my mother to always protect her. 30 years I had kept it. Was I to throw it away now at the very end and call myself faithful? But on the other side was Lowry, with her jaw set, walking into my life with her eyes open and no idea where the road led. And somewhere in the small hours, my dear, I finally saw the thing I'd been hiding from for 3 decades. I had told myself all those years that I kept silent to protect Vera. But Vera no longer needed protecting. Gwyn was dead, the children grown, the danger 30 years gone. I was not protecting anyone anymore. I was simply afraid of the upheaval, afraid of breaking a promise even when keeping it had become a kind of lie, afraid, most of all, of letting go of the quiet, sad dignity I'd wrapped myself in for so long that I no longer knew who I'd be without it. The promise had become a place to hide, and I was about to let my granddaughter build the same hiding place and call it honor. That was the night I decided to speak. Not for me. My dear, I'd made my peace with my own ruin long ago, or thought I had. For Lowry, because I could not bear to watch her walk into my life. And I understood all at once that my 30 years of silence had not even been the noble sacrifice I'd told myself it was, because a true sacrifice helps someone, and my silence in the end had helped no one. It hadn't made Vera a better person. It had let her become a worse one, comfortable in a lie. It hadn't protected the children, who were grown adults now, and could have borne the truth years ago. It had only protected the lie itself, and the lie had grown fat on my silence for 30 years. The kindest thing I could do for Lowry and for the whole family and even for Vera was the thing I'd been too afraid to do for 3 decades, tell the truth at last out loud. And so we come back to the Christmas table, my dear. I set down my fork and the table went quiet and I told them, all of it. The rainy night, the man's house, the letters, the message, the neighbor who saw me, the promise. I told them that I had never betrayed my husband, not once in 50 years of marriage. I told them I had gone to that house for my sister, to protect her marriage and her children. And I looked down the table at Vera, my dear, who had gone white as the tablecloth, and I did not accuse her, I did not rage at her. I simply said, I promised you 30 years ago I'd carry this forever, Vera. And I have. But I'm 80 years old, and I've just watched Lowry start to do the very same thing to her own life. And I will not go to my grave letting these children believe a lie about me, and letting another generation think that swallowing the truth is the same as being good. I'm sorry, I love you, but I'm putting it down now. The silence in that room, my dear, you could have heard a pin drop in it. And then, and this is the part I had not dared to hope for, my sister Vera put her face in her hands and she began to weep, and she said into her hands in front of all her children and grandchildren, it's true. Every word, it was me. Edith covered for me, I let her take it. I let her take it for 30 years. God forgive me, I let my own sister be the bad one so I could go on being the good one. And she looked up, my dear, ruined and relieved all at once, the way people look when a weight they've carried so long they'd forgotten it was there is finally lifted, and she said, thank you, Edith. Thank you for making me say it. I never had the courage. You always were the brave one. I just let everyone think you were the wicked one instead. It did not fix everything in an instant. My dear, 30 years don't dissolve over a Christmas pudding. There was shock, and there were tears, and there were grown children having to rearrange their entire understanding of their mother and their aunt in the space of an evening. But something broke open in that family that night that had needed breaking open for 3 decades. And what flowed in afterward was something cleaner than we'd had in all those years of the comfortable lie. There was one moment in those weeks, my dear, that I shall treasure to the end of my days. Vera's eldest, my nephew David, the bridegroom's joke at that long-ago wedding had been at his sister's wedding. You'll remember, came to my door alone, a man of 50 now, and he stood on my step and he could hardly speak. And then he said, Auntie Edith, I grew up thinking you were the one who couldn't be trusted. My whole life. And it was you protecting us the whole time. You let me think that about you for 30 years to spare me knowing the truth about my own mum. I don't even know how to say sorry for a thing that big. And I took his hands, my dear, and I said, you don't have to, love. You weren't to know. Nobody was to know. That was rather the point. And he wept, this grown man, on my doorstep, and I held him the way I'd once held his mother, and I thought, 30 years it took, but here it is. Here is the moment the truth gives back what the lie took away. My nieces and nephews came to me one by one over the following weeks, and they apologized for the whispers, for the edges of the weddings, for a lifetime of thinking the worst of me. And to be seen at last after 30 years, to have my true face given back to me, my dear, was a feeling I cannot put into words. And Vera and I, well, we are sisters, my dear. We were close as girls, and we are 2 old women now with not many years left, and we have chosen, both of us, to spend those years as sisters again rather than as the keeper and the kept of a dead lie. I have forgiven her. It was easier than I expected in the end, once the truth was finally in the room where it belonged. But the sweetest fruit of that night, my dear, was Lowry, because my granddaughter sat at that table and watched her old grandmother stand up after 30 years and put down a burden she'd carried for a lifetime, and she understood, without my ever having to say it to her directly, exactly what she had been about to do to herself. She came to me the next morning, my dear, and she said, Nana, I was going to do what you did, wasn't I? And I said, yes, love, you were, I could see it, that's why I spoke. And she did not take on that blame that wasn't hers. She told her own truth, gently and in good time, and she spared herself the 30 years. My speaking saved her a lifetime, my dear. That alone was worth the 30 years of waiting to find the courage, though I dearly wish I'd found it sooner. Now here is the lesson, my dear, and it is a subtle one, so let me be careful with it, because I do not want you to take the wrong thing from an old woman's hard-won wisdom. I am not telling you that silence is always wrong, or that you should never carry a thing to protect someone you love. Sometimes that is exactly the right and noble thing to do, a kindness kept quiet, a confidence honored, a person shielded. There is real virtue in discretion, and the world would be a crueler place without it. But you must learn to tell the difference, my dear, between a silence that protects and a silence that simply lets a wrong roll on. Ask yourself, who is my silence actually helping? If the honest answer is no one but the lie itself, then it is not nobility you're practicing. It is fear or pride or habit dressed up as virtue. A true sacrifice has a limit and a purpose. A silence that has outlived its purpose, that goes on for 30 years protecting nothing but a comfortable falsehood and crushing an innocent heart, that is not a sacrifice, my dear. That is a slow surrender. And I'll tell you the other thing I learned. The hardest one. Bearing a wrong in dignified silence can feel so very righteous. There is a kind of pride in being the one who suffers and never complains, and that pride can keep you silent long after speaking would have set everyone free. Do not fall in love with your own martyrdom, my dear. It is one of the sweetest and most dangerous traps there is. I wore my undeserved guilt like a hair shirt for 30 years and told myself it made me good, when really it only made me sad, and let everyone around me off the hook of the truth. The truth, told with love and without cruelty, is nearly always kinder in the end than the most dignified of lies. It was for us. It came 30 years late, but it came, and it was not too late after all, and oh, my dear, the freedom of it. So if you are carrying a silence tonight, a truth you've swallowed to keep the peace, a blame that was never yours, a lie you've let stand because speaking felt like making a fuss, I want you to ask yourself my question: who is my silence helping? And if the answer is no one, then perhaps, my dear, it is time to set down your fork at the table and feel your old heart hammer like a girl's and say the words you should have said long ago. It is rarely as late as you fear. I spoke at 80 after 30 years, and it was the bravest and the best thing I ever did, and my only regret is the 29 years I waited to do it. Don't wait as long as I did. Thank you for sitting with me tonight. My dear, if there is something you need to say, say it. Good night, and God bless, and mind how you go.